On the day of my wedding, my childhood friend Ethan Hayes drove 500 miles to whisk me away from the banquet. I went from being a fallen socialite to becoming the wife of a top tycoon overnight. Ethan Hayes bought out every rose in North Woodward, and night after night we entwined on beds strewn with petals. Everyone thought he was deeply in love with me. It wasn't until 3 years later, when my cousin returned after her divorce, that I realized why he, who had always avoided me, had come to steal me from my wedding. That was the first time I met my legendary cousin, who looked strikingly similar to me, about 70 to 80% alike, with an identical figure to boot. Ethan gently caressed her slightly rounded belly and said, "Chloe, Isabella is carrying my child. From now on, you'll take care of her. You're someone I trust to handle things." A surge of bitterness welled up inside me. I pushed Ethan away, ran upstairs, and dialed my father's number, only for him to say, "You and Isabella are both daughters of the Miller family. No matter whom Ethan loves, the Miller family stands to benefit. Besides, if it weren't for Isabella, Ethan would never have married you. Learn to get along with Isabella from now on, and stop defying Ethan. Only when he's happy can the Miller family prosper." I wiped away my tears, hung up the phone, took off the ring from my ring finger, and flung it out the window with all my might. Half a month later, I got into his arch-rival's car, while my ex-husband knelt and begged me to stay. The day Isabella Miller moved into the Hayes residence, I became the laughingstock of all Northwood City. The society women who used to invite me to art exhibitions every few days all flocked around Isabella instead. "Mrs. Hayes, my husband is off today, so I won't be joining the exhibition." "Mrs. Hayes, about that expensive brooch I gave you last time, I'd like it returned. I'll have a courier collect it shortly." I chuckled lightly and instructed the servants to return all the gifts those ladies had given over the years. Give it back to them. They're still counting on these things to curry favor with their new master. That evening, as soon as Ethan returned with Isabella, the steward replaced all the belongings in my bedroom with Isabella's. "Isabella is pregnant. You'll give her your room and move to the guest room next door. Isabella loves cream of tomato and basil soup the most. Go make some." I ignored him and continued to wield my brush, absorbed in painting on the paper. Eventually, he strode toward me, the corners of his lips quirking into an ambiguous smile. Then he reached out, lifted my painting effortlessly, and tore it apart. My heart sank, tears nearly surged from my eyes. Once, he claimed to love the serenity of my painting the most, yet now, the very hands that praised me had shredded my artwork. A stand-in is always just a stand-in. The moment Isabella, the real one, returned, I became less than a stranger in his heart. The first time I saw Isabella, I was stunned by how closely she resembled me, 7 or 8 parts out of 10. It wasn't until Ethan spoke those words that I realized, it wasn't that she resembled me, but rather that I had always resembled her. No wonder Ethan never liked me to speak during our intimate moments. The one thing most unlike her was my voice. He withdrew his gaze from the torn drawing paper and let it linger on my face. "Chloe, I don't like repeating myself. 3 years ago, he snatched me away from a wedding ceremony, knelt at my feet, kissed my hands lightly, and asked me in a tearful voice, 'Chloe, will you marry me?' Back then, I was still drowning in the pain of having my confession to him rejected and being forced into a business marriage alliance. His sudden appearance was like a beam of light, piercing through endless darkness and illuminating my heart. Barely containing my excitement, I asked him, why? He kept pounding his chest while cursing himself for being a scoundrel. "Chloe, I'm sorry. I was blind before, too cowardly to confess my feelings for you. But when I heard you were getting married, I nearly went mad with jealousy. I literally lost my mind." His warm tears fell on the back of my hand, scalding both my skin and the deepest corners of my heart. I immediately agreed to marry him. At that moment he held me tightly in his arms, yet somehow I inexplicably felt something was missing. It wasn't until recently that I learned, 3 years ago on the day I got married, was also the day Isabella married her European husband. The person he wanted to stop from marrying wasn't me, but Isabella. Yet if he loved Isabella, how could he bear to embarrass her? How could he bear to stand in the way of her happiness? The one he loved madly, loved to the point of madness, was never me, it was Isabella. He poured out all his love and hatred for Isabella onto me, yet I, of all people, was deemed unworthy to bear his child. I quietly set down the paintbrush, lifted my gaze to meet his eyes, and spoke with calm detachment. "Ethan, let's get a divorce. I've grown tired of being Mrs. Hayes. Here, you can have it back. You don't want Isabella's child to bear the stigma of being a bastard either, do you?" But instantly, cracks appeared on his calm face. He stared at me, his eyes nearly bursting with rage. "Chloe Miller, I've told you Isabella is only staying here temporarily. Can't you even tolerate that much? Want a divorce? Then pay me back double every penny I've invested in the Miller family over these years. If you can't do it, don't ever mention those 2 words to me again in this lifetime." My heart kept constricting, an indescribable bitterness spreading through my chest, pressing down until I could barely breathe. He didn't love me, yet he wouldn't let me go either. Isabella slipped her arm through his, tears welling in her eyes. Ethan, don't make things difficult for Chloe. It's only natural she dislikes me when I appeared so suddenly. But truly, I never intended to take you from her. As soon as the words were spoken, her tears fell like broken strings of pearls, dripping down in large drops. Ethan was momentarily at a loss, then took out his phone and dialed a number. Dad, I heard Mom's cancer has relapsed and she's been hospitalized. Chloe hasn't been very obedient lately. How about tomorrow you bring Mom over so she can teach her how to be a proper wife? My heart instantly tightened. I never thought such words could come from Ethan's mouth. Ethan, you're crazy. My mother is still ill. She can't possibly leave the hospital now. He smirked slightly. Oh, so what of it? Maybe if her daughter were more obedient. I immediately understood his implication and grabbed his arm in alarm. Creamy tomato basil soup, is it? I'll start cooking it right away. I'm going right now. Isabella leaned against his arm, sobbing. If little sister Chloe finds it troublesome, she really doesn't have to make it for me. That's what she said, but the look she gave me was full of defiance. Thinking of my mother, I accidentally knocked over the soup bowl, sending scalding broth splashing onto the top of my foot, instantly turning the entire area red. Ethan came at the sound, his usual care and concern turning into blame. What's so hard about making soup? If you didn't want to do it, you should have just said so. No one was forcing you. I can't just completely withdraw overnight from someone I've loved throughout my youth. Tears burst forth like a mountain flood. He rubbed his temples and said impatiently, if Isabella doesn't get her soup within half an hour, there goes my investment in the Miller family project. For your sake. Do you think your profit-obsessed father will still care for your sickly mother by then? He certainly knew how to push my buttons. I immediately went to pick up the broken pieces on the floor. My vision blurred by tears. I accidentally cut my hand on a porcelain shard. Bright red blood droplets fell to the ground, and the sharp pain made me wince. This scene annoyed him again. He sighed helplessly and walked out of the kitchen, carefully embracing Isabella in his arms. When I stood beside Ethan and Isabella, holding the bowl of creamy tomato basil soup, Isabella glanced at me and frowned, saying to Ethan, Ethan, why does the soup have a bloody smell? It's disgusting. Ethan immediately threw the bowl in his hand right in front of me. The soup splashed everywhere, and the warm liquid spilled onto my exposed skin. I stood aside like a startled fawn, trembling as I said, I'll make another bowl. Just as I turned around, Ethan called out, don't bother. Haven't you brought enough bad luck already? Go to bed early tonight. Stop being so absent-minded all day long. For a moment, I thought he was showing concern. My lifeless heart rippled with hope, but then he promptly doused my spirits with cold water. How can I trust you to take care of Isabella when you're like this? So it's about Isabella. If it weren't for Isabella cherishing years of sisterly bonds, when would it ever be your turn to care for her? I sneered and asked calmly, are you saying I should act like a servant to care for my husband's mistress? And still be grateful to both him and the woman who stole him from me? The word mistress finally stung Ethan. His hand suddenly clutched my neck, then gradually tightened. Chloe Miller, I won't allow you to speak of Isabella that way. You should know, if not for your face, you wouldn't even have the right to stand before me. I clutched his hand, gasping for breath like a drowning man, then said stubbornly, Ethan, let's get divorced. His hand suddenly released its grip as I clutched my throat, gasping for air. But he merely tossed out the words, don't even think about it, before wrapping his arm around Isabella's waist and walking out the door. Suddenly it became clear, his refusal to divorce me wasn't out of any newfound compassion for me. This was simply his way of punishing Isabella for abandoning him to marry someone else years ago, while I, from beginning to end, had only ever been a medium through which he loved her. Ethan unexpectedly gifted me an evening gown. There's a banquet tonight at Clearwater Manor. You're coming with me. I hesitated before asking solemnly, is Isabella going too? You're only going to look after Isabella. Why else would I bring you? His words always managed to strike precisely at my shattered heart, the suffocating ache in my chest threatening to drown me. To avoid looking too pathetic, I grabbed my gown and headed upstairs. He suddenly seized my wrist and pulled me into his embrace. What's wrong? Feeling wronged? Isabella won't threaten your position as Mrs. Hayes. She loves her freedom. Once the child is born, she'll leave. You'll be the mother then. I'd never imagined this was his plan. If there had been any love left for him, in that moment, only disgust remained. His Isabella loves freedom, so I must have my wings clipped to take care of their child. The boy in my memory had, at some unknown point, already begun to rot and decay. Ethan, you're completely insane. Before I could finish, his soft lips descended. The thought that he'd kissed Isabella the same way during our marriage made me nauseous. I pushed him away with all my strength and slapped him sharply across the face. He touched the cheek marked with my fingers, raising an expression that was neither a smile nor a smirk. The world spun as he hoisted me over his shoulder and carried me upstairs. He threw me onto the bed, roughly tearing at my clothes. Chloe, let's have a baby too. I couldn't help retching. How could a person be so utterly revolting? He suddenly stopped what he was doing, looking at me with sheer disbelief. "Chloe Miller, you're disgusted by me?" Then like a madman, he bit into my neck. I retaliated viciously by sinking my teeth into his shoulder and delivering a sharp kick between his legs. His pained release gave me the chance to wrench free from his grasp. I cowered in the corner, trembling as I asked him, "Ethan, what will it take for you to let me go?" After a long pause, he finally composed himself, rubbing his temples before speaking impatiently. "Remember the banquet tonight, don't be late." He still refused to give me a clear answer, and I couldn't bring myself to leave him defiantly, not with my mother's situation hanging over me. At the banquet, Isabella clung to his arm in a floor-length crimson gown studded with rhinestones. Had he not been my husband, I might have even called them a match made in heaven. "Mrs. Hayes, you're as radiant as ever after all these months. Mr. Hayes is truly a lucky man." Ethan held Isabella's hand and explained, "You've mistaken her identity. This is Isabella, Chloe's cousin, and the mother of my child." The man froze for a moment, then broke into an understanding smile. My mistake. I'll punish myself with a drink for my poor eyesight." Ethan's words had barely left his mouth when everyone's eyes began darting back and forth between Isabella and me. "So the one in white is actually Chloe Miller? So Mr. Hayes crashed that wedding all those years ago simply because his wife resembled her cousin. I'd always heard Mr. Hayes had an unrequited first love. Seeing this now, isn't that first love none other than Isabella here? That face could truly topple cities and states. And to think she was some precious treasure. Turns out she's just a stand-in. To be honest, she really is incompetent. 3 years, and she still couldn't capture her own husband's heart. Men really won't love if they don't love. Even after 3 years of sharing a bed, the moment the real one returns, she's tossed aside without a second thought. 3 years, and he wouldn't even give her a child. Not like Miss Isabella. The moment she returned, she was already the mother of his child. But still, who would want a woman they don't love to bear their child? The incessant chatter and gossip reached my ears completely. I'd long understood Ethan didn't love me. In his eyes, I was just a bedmate to satisfy physical needs. Hearing it again suddenly didn't hurt as much. Suddenly, Isabella called to me, "Little sister Chloe, could you accompany me to the restroom?" At the same time, Ethan shot me a look, nothing more than a warning. I set down the champagne flute and meekly approached Isabella, extending my hand as she reached out for support. The onlookers grasped the situation instantly. Good heavens, Chloe Miller always carried herself with such airs. Who could have imagined she'd come to this? Truth be told, I've always been deferential in company. Among those society ladies, I mostly listened while they chattered. Kicking someone when they're down comes as naturally to them as breathing. "Little Chloe, you do realize Ethan doesn't love you, don't you?" I sneered. "For these 3 years, his heart and eyes have only been for you. Even if he had to cheat, he still wanted to have a child with you. Of course, I know he doesn't love me." Her hand on my wrist suddenly tightened. "Since you clearly understand, you should bow out gracefully and give up your position as Mrs. Hayes. Do you think it's because I don't want to? Right now, he's the one who refuses to divorce me. Instead of trying to persuade me here, you'd better talk to him directly." Isabella's lips curled slightly. "Since you refuse to listen, don't blame me for being ruthless." Almost simultaneously, she pushed me away before collapsing backward, hitting the ground with a heavy thud. "Isabella!" Ethan rushed over in large strides, gathering Isabella into his arms. "Chloe Miller, have you grown tired of living?" he shouted loudly, and the bodyguards immediately rushed in. "Take the lady back. Without my permission, she is not allowed to contact anyone." With an anxious expression, he strode outside carrying Isabella in his arms. Isabella's face was deathly pale, yet she still managed to throw me a snide, mocking smile. Ethan finally returned the next night. Curled up in a corner dozing off, I was abruptly pulled to my feet by him. "Chloe Miller, how could you be so malicious? Do you know Isabella almost didn't wake up from massive hemorrhaging?" His arrival was too sudden. Still in shock, it took me a while to process what he'd said. I met his murderous glare and said, "Ethan, I didn't do anything. She fell by herself. She wanted me to divorce you. I told her to bring it up with you herself. She intentionally fell to frame me." A sharp slap echoed through the air as I was violently shoved backward. Before I could react, the small of my back slammed straight into the corner of the coffee table, the pain so intense it knocked the breath from my lungs. "Do you even believe the nonsense you're spouting? Isabella loves children dearly. How could she possibly use her own child to threaten you? I've told you I won't divorce you. Isabella wouldn't deign to fight you for the title of Mrs. Hayes. Why can't you just leave her alone? It seems I've been too indulgent with you." At the time, I didn't grasp the meaning behind his words, until 3 consecutive days passed with the villa completely deserted, every last scrap of food gone. He wanted to starve me, but this punishment wasn't just about hunger. It was more about humiliating my dignity. At first, I could still hold on by drinking some water, but by the 3rd day, I truly couldn't endure it anymore. Now, his heart and eyes are only for Isabella. He's long forgotten about me, left aside like discarded leftovers. By the time he remembers me again, he'll only be able to collect my corpse. I dragged my weakened limbs to the villa's entrance, only to find every exit of the estate completely locked shut. Suddenly, I couldn't comprehend what I'd done wrong to deserve such torment from him. He was the one who interrupted the wedding, and he was the one who insisted on marrying me. Fortunately, the villa had plenty of tables and chairs, allowing me to quickly scale the courtyard wall. But the 4 to 5 meter high wall meant jumping would certainly injure my legs. But I can still tell the difference between being injured and starving to death. Steeling myself, I was about to jump when suddenly a clear voice rang out. "From that height? Are you trying to break your legs?" As he spoke, he walked to the foot of the wall and reached out his hands. Suddenly, I realized that the autumn breeze brushing against my face couldn't compare to how lightly and refreshingly his voice settled upon my heart. He caught me steady in his arms. Before I could speak, his eyes narrowed slightly as he said with a trace of grievance, "Really don't remember me?" The man's words were strange. Though I racked my brain, I couldn't recall ever meeting him anywhere. So I decided to cut straight to the chase. "Could I trouble you with a ride down the mountain? And maybe treat me to a meal? I'll pay you back. This entire mountain is an upscale villa district. If I let this man before me slip away, I won't even be able to hail a ride-sharing car." The man lifted the corner of his lips slightly. "My rates are quite high. 10 years ago it was $10 an hour, but now it's $1,000 an hour." Something flashed through my mind, yet I couldn't grasp it no matter what. But right now, having a meal is what mattered most. "Fine, I can afford it." The man chuckled lightly. "Get in the car." By the time I finished my second bowl of porridge, he suddenly spoke up. "Chloe Miller, why don't you marry me instead? I have enough money to overshadow Ethan Hayes. He'll never be able to use your mother to threaten you again." He even knew about all this, yet I truly couldn't remember who he was. Reading my confusion, he said disappointedly, "So you've really forgotten me?" "You're right. I was just a passerby in your life. It's only natural you'd forget. 10 years ago, in that alley behind Northwood Middle School, you suddenly appeared and scared off the gang that was ganging up on me. Back then, my pride was strong. Even when I was beaten half to death, I still tried to act tough in front of you." Suddenly I remembered, during our 3rd year of middle school, in the alley behind campus, there was an older boy with blood trickling from his mouth who still managed to push himself up against the wall and say to me, "I'm pretty good at fighting. You can hire me to do jobs for you, $10 an hour." Later, I used my pocket money to hire him to accompany me back to school. But at a fast food joint around the corner, I spotted the teenager wolfing down a bowl of noodles at one of the tables. "Actually, I saw you again later in high school. But at that time you were a freshman and I was a sophomore. You followed Ethan Hayes around all day. Anyone could tell you had a crush on him. But I was just an outcast abandoned by everyone back then. How could I dare approach you? Yet simply catching a glimpse of you in the crowd would have been enough. So this was the story between us. You still haven't told me your name." He smiled awkwardly and extended his hand in introduction. "Julian Vance, head of private operations for the Vance family of New York." That's the infamous Julian Vance, the illegitimate son who, within 3 years, exterminated the Vance family from within and seized control of their vast assets. "So, how about ditching Ethan Hayes and marrying me instead?" I laughed at his proposal. "Julian, you don't love me, and I don't love you either. We're not exactly marriage material. Gratitude isn't love. Besides, I only hired you for an hour back then. You earned your keep. You never owed me anything to begin with." He pondered for a moment, then suddenly took out his phone and tapped out a few lines with swift clicks. A few minutes later, his assistant brought in a document folder. He placed an agreement before me. "Since you don't want to marry me, let's work together instead. Miss Chloe Miller, on behalf of Vance Group, I formally appoint you as the Heritage Series designer for Vance Jewelry's design department. You help me make money, and I'll help you leave Ethan Hayes." It sounded like a decent deal, so I signed on the spot. "You probably don't want to go back to the Hayes residence. I have a place at Bayview Heights, you can stay there." Before I could politely decline, he added, "Only with a clear mind can one create outstanding designs." I had no more reasons to refuse. As he was leaving after dropping me off at the villa, he suddenly turned back and said solemnly, "Chloe Miller, I've genuinely liked you for 10 years, not out of gratitude." I had just finished packing when Ethan called. "Chloe Miller, where are you?" "What? Are you abandoning your mother too? Be good and tell me where you are. I'll come pick you up." I sneered. "Ethan, the divorce papers will be delivered to Hayes Group by the lawyer soon. As for my mother, you don't need to worry about her." "Chloe Miller, are you serious?" His tone gradually grew manic. "I've told you Isabella won't take your place. Why won't you listen to me? So you want a divorce? Fine, just don't come crying to me when you regret it." Julian acted swiftly, transferring my mother to Vance Holdings Hospital that very night. After that phone call, Ethan never bothered me again. Since taking Julian's assignment, I've been working around the clock on the manuscript. He believed in me, how could I let him down? It wasn't until I submitted the first draft of the design to Julian and checked my phone that I realized Ethan had been traveling around the world with Isabella for the past month. He's clearly head over heels for Isabella, posting at least 3 romantic updates on social media every single day. A mutual friend commented under his post, "Yo, buddy, wedding bell soon?" Ethan fired back, "If you don't want your eyes, you can donate them." The man, clearly intimidated, had no choice but to turn to me. "Sis, what happened between you and Ethan?" I scoffed. Everyone in those photos knew exactly who was who, yet they still dared ask me such a thing. "Ethan and I are already divorced. Didn't he tell you?" That very night, Ethan barged outside my villa like a rabid dog, shoving me into his car before speeding away. He climbed on top, his breath spraying against my neck in the cramped car. "Chloe Miller, you're really something. I'm your husband. Doesn't it hurt you at all to watch me cozying up to other women?" I met his gaze. "Ethan, we signed the divorce papers a month ago. Who you like, who you have kids with, none of it has anything to do with me anymore." His eyes darkened like a beast's as he lunged at me. I shoved him away and slapped him across the face. "Ethan, you bastard," he roared in fury, ripping off his tie to bind my hands tightly before starting the car. The car raced like a rocket along the winding mountain road, the night wind slamming against the windows with a piercing howl, startling me into pleading, "Ethan, slow down, this is dangerous, don't you understand?" Yet he showed no intention of slowing, not until I was reduced to tears, cowering in the passenger seat, did he finally ease off the speed. The car stopped deep in the village, and Ethan carried me out without a glance back, walking straight toward the small 2-story building ahead. Realizing something, I panicked instantly. "Ethan, what are you doing? Unlawful imprisonment is a serious crime, do you understand?" But he paid no attention to my words, throwing me onto the bed before pressing down on me. I pushed against him with all my strength, yet couldn't budge him an inch. Helpless, I resigned to my fate. Perhaps I owed him from a past life. Seeing that I had stopped resisting, he suddenly halted. "Ethan, I'm tired. Can't you just let me go?" "Yes, I was wrong. My mistake was falling for you. But I've already paid for that mistake with 3 years of my life. Why won't you let me go? Weren't you obsessed with Isabella? Don't you love her? Well, she's back. Go love her then. What's the point of clinging to a substitute like me?" He buried his face in the crook of my neck, warm tears slipping down my collarbone. After a long pause, he finally spoke in a low voice. "Chloe, I think I've fallen in love with you." I sighed, suddenly finding it all utterly ridiculous. "Ethan, was playing with me fun for you? Now that I don't want to stay by your side anymore, you casually pull out some love to deceive me? Your love is simply too cheap. I don't need your love anymore. I don't love you anymore. Why don't you go shower Isabella with all that affection instead?" He gently stroked my head, as if petting a house cat. I suddenly felt sick to my stomach, so in his eyes, I was merely a pet all along, not even worthy of being treated as well as a pet cat. "Chloe, you're exhausted. Maple Creek Village is charming, especially in late autumn when the whole village turns reddish-orange. Get some proper rest, and when you've come to your senses, I'll come pick you up." With that, he rose and walked out, casually taking my bag with him. I hastily climbed out of bed and chased after him, but I was still a step too late. Through the iron gate, I frantically pounded on the cold metal bars, trying to call him back. "Ethan, don't go. You can't do this to me. If you leave, I'll never forgive you." He turned to me with a bitter smile. "Chloe, what does it matter whether you forgive me or not? As long as I can stay with you forever, even if you hate me, it's better than seeing you in another man's arms." He's insane, truly insane. I stretched out my hands helplessly, screaming my lungs out, but he still walked away without looking back. Like a lost child, I slid down to sit by the door when suddenly a thunderous boom erupted. "Ethan Hayes, who gave you the audacity to take what's mine from my territory?" Julian suddenly appeared, kicking Ethan, who was about to leave, squarely from the corner, sending him sprawling into the courtyard. Like a drowning man spotting driftwood, I cried out his name. "Julian, I'm here." Ethan staggered to his feet, pointing at Julian. "She's my wife. What's wrong with me taking my own wife away?" Julian forced a smile. "I'd forgotten about that. It may be true now, but tomorrow's another story." The words barely left his lips when he raised his fist and swung at Ethan again with a vicious force. Soon, the two were locked in a brutal tussle. It wasn't until a crowd rushed over that they were finally pulled apart. As Julian fished the keys from Ethan's pocket and the wrought iron gate creaked open, he pulled me into his embrace. Suddenly, my tears began falling in heavy, uncontrollable drops. My heart inexplicably clenched with worry. "I'm sorry, I broke my promise to you. I failed to keep you safe." He held me in his arms. Unlike Ethan's forceful embrace, his hold was as gently warm as his entire being. Ethan was being restrained by his men, yet still strained violently against them to lunge forward. "Julian Vance, let her go. She's my wife. You have no right to take her. Julian paused, eyeing him coldly. Oh? He turned to me with gentle tenderness and asked, Chloe, will you come with me? I nodded, and he held me tighter. Ethan Hayes, even if your divorce isn't finalized yet, that doesn't justify your illegal abduction and confinement of her. I'll be handing you over to Vance Group's legal division. The legal department of Vance Group is renowned in the industry for its flawless track record, with each member being a luminary in the legal field. It wasn't until the driver had put me in the car and driven down the mountain that I noticed Julian's slightly trembling hands. What's wrong with you? Are you okay? He didn't say anything, just suddenly pulled me into his arms. I really thought I was going to lose you again this time. I was truly terrified. After reaching adulthood, I'd never been afraid of anything, but the thought of not being able to find you, of you being forced to accept him and living an unhappy life forever, that terrifies me to death. It was as if something had gently brushed against my heart, making it tremble involuntarily. I abruptly averted my gaze from his eyes, fearing that if I looked at him for even one more second, my heart might leap right out of my chest. This feeling, I hadn't even experienced it 3 years ago when Ethan stole my wedding away from me. The moment I looked away, he seemed to instantly revert to his usual carefree self, as composed as drifting clouds and flowing water. Ethan Hayes clearly knows you're now the jewelry designer under my Vance Group banner, yet he dares to abduct you. He's outright disrespecting me. Autumn is coming. It's time for the Hayes Group to cool off too. Chloe, every debt Ethan owes you over these 3 years, I'll collect them all for you. When the car stopped in front of the villa, he suddenly spoke. Chloe, do you want to divorce Ethan Hayes? I froze for a moment, then nodded. Just as I was about to thank him, he climbed into the car beaming like a triumphant general. Julian truly lived up to being the head of the Vance family. In just one morning, he had the finalized divorce agreement delivered into my hands. From now on, you'll have no further connection to Ethan Hayes. I raised my eyes to meet his gaze and finally voiced the doubt in my heart. How did you convince Ethan to nod? His Adam's apple bobbed as he hesitated before finally speaking. I threatened him with Hayes Group's project on the East Coast. The moment the words left his mouth, he hurriedly explained, Chloe, I wasn't bullying him with power. It's just the fastest way to deal with Ethan. I know you're not that kind of person. Besides, even if you are that kind of person, there's nothing wrong with it. Those who can be oppressed by your power must not be innocent to begin with. I took out the design draft from behind me and handed it to him. Just finished this today. Take a look. Is it sufficient as thanks? I met Ethan again at a banquet a month later. Accompanying him in full attire was still Isabella. Ironically enough, he keeps claiming to love me, yet to this day he can't let go of Isabella. Isabella was the first to speak. Little sister's charm truly is extraordinary, already luring in someone new so quickly. Sometimes I envy you, little sister. Your luck is always so good. Wherever you cast your line, you always reel in a big one. Julian tightened his grip on my hand, and I gently tapped his thumb to reassure him not to worry. Suddenly his phone rang, and I whispered, Go ahead. I can handle this. Seeing Julian leave, Isabella grew increasingly unrestrained. Sister, since you caused the death of my child, don't you owe me an explanation? I turned to Ethan, who was watching the show, and said coldly, You know better than I do how your child was lost. What? Since the child is gone, Mr. Hayes has abandoned you? Surely not. You're his white moonlight, the unattainable dream of his youth, the woman he's cherished in his heart for a decade. How could he possibly discard you? Isn't that right, Mr. Hayes? Ethan picked up a glass of champagne and walked toward Isabella and me. No, you're mistaken. Once Isabella has recovered, she'll return to Europe. Her parents are there, after all. From now on, we will have no further connection. Chloe, does this put your mind at ease? Give me one more chance. This time, I won't hurt you again, okay? I scoffed lightly. What a pity. Mr. Hayes' love is too cheap to be worthy. Just being near you makes me fear getting dirted. If Mr. Hayes is so indiscriminate with his affections, perhaps he should visit the Velvet Lounge. There are plenty of girls there waiting for his tender care. But Ethan was clearly different from before. Even so, he didn't get angry. Chloe, does this mean I can take it that you're jealous? I was left speechless. This side of him was something I hadn't anticipated. Julian seemed to have encountered some trouble. It had been ages since he left, which was unlike his usual behavior. After a moment's thought, I went out to look for him too. But at a corner, someone suddenly covered my mouth and nose, and I lost consciousness in an instant. A man's lewd laughter echoed in my ears as I groggily regained consciousness, only to find him kneeling astride me. Behind him, a camera's light was glaringly on. Slut, so eager to seduce me. Can't wait to taste what I've got, huh? Don't worry, you'll get your fill soon. As his filthy words reached my ears, the doped handkerchief took full effect. No matter how hard I fought it, heat crawled uncontrollably through my body. My cheeks burned, and my thoughts tangled into chaos. The pot-bellied man lowered his face to my neck and whispered words meant only for me. Guess what? When the footage of us entangled naked plays on the big screen later, Do you think those two men would still want you? Men are all the same. Who would marry a promiscuous woman past her prime? Even if they were willing, the families behind them would never agree. My consciousness grew increasingly hazy. Even if Ethan wanted to torment me, he wouldn't stoop to such underhanded tactics. It had to be Isabella's doing. Woman, you're so much more interesting than your sister. My mind was buzzing. It really was Isabella. Moreover, this man seemed to have a rather close relationship with her. At the banquet, Ethan, noticing my prolonged absence, was about to step out to search for me when Isabella suddenly called out to him. Ethan, I suddenly have a stomachache. Could you help me over to sit for a while? As soon as the words were spoken, the large screen suddenly lit up. Only when he saw the figure in the image clearly did he suddenly turn toward Isabella with a gaze as sharp as scrutinizing a criminal. Is it you? Isabella shook her head with a sob. Ethan, what are you talking about? I don't understand. The veins on Ethan's neck suddenly bulged violently. Isabella had never seen him like this before. His patience had completely worn thin as he roared. Where is Chloe Miller? Talk. By the time Julian finished handling the urgent matter and returned, this was the scene he witnessed. He hurled a liquor bottle with force. The screen instantly flickered with black and white streaks before swiftly going dark. He grabbed Isabella by the neck and roared, "What have you done to her?" His grip tightened, yet Isabella showed no sign of begging for mercy. Instead, her gaze held nothing but defiance as she stared back at him. He flung Isabella aside with brutal force. Gasping for breath as she regained her freedom, she immediately began hurling accusations at the two men before her. What's so great about Chloe Miller anyway? She's not as pretty as me, doesn't have as good an education, so why does everyone flock around her? You love her, but I refuse to allow it. Even if I die, I won't tell you where she is. I'd like to see if you'll still love her like this after she becomes a slut who's at everyone's mercy. Julian's fists clenched with a cracking sound, veins bulging on his neck as he spoke icily. You want to die? I'll grant you that wish, he said coldly. The moment the words left his lips, several figures clad in black stepped inside, their short blades gleaming. Cut her into 1,000 pieces. Let's see how long her stubborn mouth lasts. With that, he dashed out without a backward glance, searching each room one by one. The bodyguard had just smeared something on the blade and hadn't even swung it down yet when Isabella hastily spoke up. I'll talk. She's in 407. Julian frantically kicked open doors while answering the phone, then dashed toward 407 like a madman. When he entered, I was crouched in the corner, clutching a blood-stained wine bottle, staring terrified at what lay before me. He knelt before me, mistaking him for one of the attackers. I kept waving the bottle at him wildly. A familiar voice suddenly rang out, his voice trembling as he spoke. Chloe, it's Julian. Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. Don't be afraid. Suddenly coming back to my senses, I recognized the man before me and burst into sobs. He took off his coat and draped it over me, holding me tightly in his embrace. Don't be afraid. I'm here. I'll always be here. I held him tightly, somehow feeling that with him by my side, no matter what happened, I wouldn't be afraid anymore. By the time Ethan came running up, panting, Julian had already carried me to the elevator. He looked at me, stammering, I'm sorry, Chloe, I came too late. I leaned gently into Julian's arms, tugged at his sleeve, and understanding my gesture, he carried me into the elevator. I hate Ethan for toying with my feelings, but now lying in Julian's arms, everything I'd been through before seems so insignificant. My heart and eyes are filled only with this man before me, as if his presence alone could make me forget all that pain. The moment Isabella saw me, she collapsed to her knees like a deflated balloon. Yet just as Julian was carrying me away, she suddenly screamed, Chloe Miller, how dare you? You were just my substitute. How could you possibly win Ethan's love? Julian stopped in his tracks and turned back to look at Isabella. What kind of person is Ethan Hayes? Don't assume everyone shares your taste for trash just because you like garbage yourself. Chloe has always been one of a kind. She deserves a man who loves her wholeheartedly. As for Ethan Hayes, he's not worthy. Julian ultimately spared Isabella and handed her over to the police. With multiple charges combined, she was sentenced to 16 years, a fitting punishment for her crimes. After that night, Julian used every means to suppress the Hayes Group. In just half a month, the once dominant business empire that had unified the commerce of Northwood City was on the verge of collapse. In the end, it was Ethan who voluntarily resigned as CEO and relinquished all his shares that barely saved the Hayes Group from total ruin. On the day Julian and I returned to New York, Ethan suddenly appeared at the airport, but the high-spirited and vigorous demeanor he once had was gone. Julian glanced at him but stepped aside nonetheless, making space for him and me. His Adam's apple bobbed several times before he spoke in a low voice. Chloe, I'm sorry. I smiled faintly. Forget it, it's all in the past. Let's release each other and live well. Ethan lowered his head with a quiet laugh, yet that smile held more bitterness than anything else. Now you can't even be bothered to hate me anymore? Ethan, hatred won't solve anything. it only traps people. And I don't want to remain imprisoned in those 3 years any longer. I've already built my own future. You should have your own life too. If there's nothing else, then goodbye. It's almost time to board. Julian walked over to take my luggage when Ethan's voice suddenly called out again. Aren't you afraid he might betray you one day too? Julian wrapped his arm around my shoulders, leaned down, and whispered in my ear. I won't. I belonged to you since 10 years ago. Even if you don't love me, I'll keep waiting for you. I turned around and said to Ethan cheerfully. He wouldn't, because he's Julian Vance. Julian curled his lips and added, she's no longer the Chloe Miller she used to be. She's the lead designer of Vance Group's Heritage Jewelry Collection. Even without me, she'd do just fine. Later, the Heritage Jewelry Collection from Vance Group took the international stage, winning growing admiration and even drawing numerous foreign tourists to visit the places that had inspired those jewelry designs. American heritage culture gradually stepped onto the global scene and became recognized by the world. Julian sat among the flowers telling stories to our daughter when she suddenly asked him, Daddy, why did the general still help the princess even though he knew she would kill him after becoming queen? He ruffled her hair and smiled, perhaps because the highest form of love is fulfillment and elevation. You'll understand when you're older. This lesson he casually taught our daughter was something he lived out with me for a lifetime. If I must make a wish, then I hope that he and I can find each other in the crowd life after life, never to part again. The end.